Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Bobble Pod. On this episode, I am joined as by guest Ben Westerby. Hello, Ben.
Hi, Manny.
Thank you for jumping on board. We're going to be talking about managing your marketing and business finance. But before I get into that, as always, everybody knows the drill. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. And if you're on YouTube, hello, YouTube. Don't forget to click on the subscription button and the bell notification so you can get up-to-date episodes every Tuesday, which you can watch or listen on all streaming platforms. So, Ben Westerby, Portfolio Finance Director. Very different kind of portfolio of, I guess, that we normally have. It's always direct marketing related or someone who owns a business. But we reached out to us on LinkedIn wanting to be on the podcast, and we talked about, your role in finance. So tell us a bit about yourself, your journey so far, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. I think just from a journey, strangely, at the age of 13, I realised I wanted to be an accountant. So everybody else wants to be a pop star or a footballer. I'd quickly realised by that point, I can't sing and I wasn't good enough at football. So I realised where I wanted to be. And I never went to university. I did my A-levels and decided then that actually I could train to be an accountant on an evening and a weekend. Started working in a small family-owned business and worked there, got some really good experience, and then worked for a lot of big businesses, particularly in food, but also with some big brands as well. And then fell back into family-owned businesses again. And it were working in family-owned businesses that I really enjoyed, and own and manage businesses. And then just over a year ago, decided that I wanted to try and help as many businesses as I could. And I'd offer this part-time finance support for those that probably couldn't afford or didn't warrant a full-time finance resource. And in my eyes, they were missing out on a level of expertise that otherwise bigger companies could only afford. And I enjoy helping out people and adding value to businesses and getting involved.
It's one of the most important aspects of a business is finance. We're a service-based company, so our biggest assets are our staff and our clients. And in order to facilitate both, you need to have strong cash flow. Especially everyone says it's difficult economic times, and it is a difficult economic times. What's your view on that?
My view is, as with any times, there'll be winners and losers, and it's how you set your business up. Ultimately, there's events that happen that are beyond our control. But if you understand your numbers in your business, your drivers, and you keep an eye on cash, you're much better placed, in my view, then to grasp any opportunities that arise. And I've seen businesses. I work with e-commerce businesses, and everybody's told us this year's doom and gloom. They're all up year on year. So actually, for businesses that are putting themselves out there and doing things in the right way, there's plenty of opportunities.
When you say up, do you mean in terms of revenue? But what about this significant increase in cost? Because we know clients that are up, but the margins aren't up because their costs have gone up significantly. So they're actually down in terms of profitability.
The clients that I'm working with are all at least level from last year from a profit point of view. Sales are up. Percentage margin might be down slightly. And I've got people that were affected, probably worse hit last year, with fluctuating exchange rates and container rates if you're importing products. So there were a lot of costs that businesses took on board last year that were hidden from the general public. And this year now it's gas and electric prices that hit everybody. Wage inflation's going up. But what I have seen is a lot of people have managed to put price increases through this year, and it's probably been slightly easier than what it's been in the past.
Yeah, a lot of our clients had no choice but to do it. But that final nail in the coffin, and I don't care what criticism we get, is Liz Truss. She was incompetent. She ruined the economy. We have mentioned this on a previous podcast. It took us, as a business that was doing really, really well up until that point with the news, where some of our local businesses that had the impact. One company, because of all the shipping container costs, everything else was based on value, in terms of their model was based on being a little cheaper than most of their competitors because they had more control over it. But they went under. Other clients decided they were just done with e-commerce and decided to sell off the companies as well. So it was very, very difficult. We kind of ended up hitting growth back in Q2 this year. So we lost a whole 7-8 months because of that decision, which wasn't really a decision. It was a BS budget that came out. And this is the thing. This is why we're talking about, managing your marketing, business, finance, because it's really, really important. And there's a lot of elements like that are out of your control that impact you drastically, because that didn't impact us, but it impacted our clients, which then had a knock-on effect to us. Because then when companies struggle, the biggest mistake I always say they make, and we're going to talk about this, is in terms of one of the discussion points is like, everyone starts cutting back, and they start going back on marketing spend and other costs, and then start to bring things in-house just to balance the books. But then that has a longer-term impact on them.
Yeah, and I think with businesses, ultimately, a lot of businesses were hit very hard, and it's the coping mechanism and how you gear your business up then to succeed. I think the businesses that can absorb some of that bad times are better placed, and you come back and you're going to be stronger. And you've mentioned there are businesses that aren't going to survive this. So the ones that are there, they're in a better position. There's a good time for new businesses to crop up. I think the businesses that have been hit hardest are those that possibly went online for the first time during the pandemic and didn't know what it were like before. So they thought that high sales and low marketing costs were the norm, and they weren't. The businesses that were about before that knew that actually this is a spike and we'll get the benefits while we can, but at some point the bubble's going to burst a bit again, and then we're going to have to be ready to go again.
So getting back a little on track, not that we're off track, is we've got some key discussion points that we want to go over. So the first one is like, in relation to managing your marketing and business finances, do you have the right information to make the right marketing decisions?
Yeah, and one of the things I'll say, and I always challenge any of my clients, is to go, right, we want to do this. And it's like, what's your purpose of doing it? Is firstly understanding what you want to achieve by spending that money. And sometimes it could be you want to grow sales. Sometimes you want to maximize profits. And sometimes it might just be a fact that you've bought too much stuff and you need to get rid of it. So actually, if you don't know how much stock you've got, if you don't know what you want to achieve by it, or if you don't know how much something costs or how much you can sell it for, how are you like measuring success? And there's a lot of businesses I've started working with, and they tend to start off with this growth when people start going, if I sell more, I'll make more money. And that's fantastic if you've got one product, because that one product, you've got the same cost. As you start getting more and more products or offerings, you're not quite sure if you have a good month or a bad month. You go, my sales are up, but my profit's down. And it's understanding that why. And it's sort of growing pains as a business.
Yeah, we always say, we always get this difficult question when it comes to, briefs elements. Is like, they always say, can you tell us how much we need to be spending? No, that's not the responsibility of us. That's a finance director, consultants, whoever you have, the internal team's responsibility to give you your marketing budget. You should be aligning your marketing budgets in line with your business objectives to write, what are you going to spend and what do you need to achieve, which is success from that in terms of return on investment. So if you're going to spend, £10,000 a month, then on an average ROAS of around about, between 3 and 4, 3-4 times, then you need to be making around 25,000 to upwards to, if you're really, really successful, £50,000 a month in return on investment from that, or return on ad spend. But that also absorbs in the original 10 grand you put in, the cost of, producing a product, customers, etc. So your margins tend to be lower, and you're right, there is a bit of bubble, but no one can tell you, that information. It has to come internally from you sitting down saying, right, we want to do digital marketing, or we want to do ad, or whatever kind of marketing it is you want to do. But what's your budget? Why do you want to spend it? And what is success? What does success look like?
I agree. I completely agree with that. And I do think as part of any good marketing budget is like put it into buckets and look at how you're going to spend it. And there's got to be an element of it. We've got an amount of money each month that we want to spend, but we don't know if we're going to get anything for it, because you need to try new things. If you don't try new things, you're always going to get what you've always got. But you mentioned there around margin, it's vital that you know what margin you're making on your product and you can measure it. So if you go into a promotion, for example, you go, right, we're going to do this marketing, we want to hit heavy this weekend. Well, if you're waiting 6, 7, 8 weeks for your numbers to come through from your accountant, you can't react to those decisions. And you need to be able to react to it. You do something and you've got to give it a bit of time. But if you know your sales have reacted that weekend, then you go, right, we might push it a bit more because actually we know we're going to get a bit more in. Whereas actually, if your sales have not changed whatsoever, you probably start looking and going, what have we missed after a few days? And then you can react. And I think that's really important to have that sort of live information.
The next element you to discuss as a key point is why you should be spending more in times when everyone else is cutting back. And I've said this a few times in the podcast before, is it's an opportunity. Chaos is a ladder, to quote, what's his name from Game of Thrones? Oh, someone help me. Peter Baelish, that's it. To quote Peter Baelish from Game of Thrones, chaos is a ladder. And when you're in a recession-style economy, you can, if you have the budget, really grow, but you're not going to see instant success. That growth comes at the end of the recession when everybody else is then piling on and trying to play catch up to the work you've already invested in.
Yeah, and I think you've touched on it there. You've got to be able to spend what you can afford. But for me, it's you should be spending the maximum that you can afford in this area, not cutting back. I think within business, there's costs and investments that you make. If you spend your money right from a marketing point of view, you're investing in your brand, which is going to stay a lot longer than that initial month that you spend it in or week that you spend it in. And some companies have different objectives. Short term, if cash is a constraint, you can only spend what you can afford. But then measuring it and looking at and actually how much money you're spending on brand building, we saw at certain times during COVID, and sorry to have to mention COVID again, but we saw during that certain advertising costs were down because there were less people advertising. So if you were spending as an online company, it were brilliant in that because you're getting much more bang for your buck. Yeah. So you spend more and more. And if you find something that's working for you, then spend that money to do it. Don't just cut back because that's going to damage your brand longer term and probably your company's growth longer term. So I think you've got to then look at, this is where, do you know what your forecast is going forward? What impact is what you're going to do now going to have on your business going forward? If you can afford to spend it, do it. And as you say, you're going to get those rewards. Sometimes where businesses react is going, right, I've spent money in January, I've not got sales in Jan. So in Feb, we go, right, we're going to cut the marketing budget. It's like, yeah, but how many people have seen your product? What measures are you doing? And it's not all around what money's being spent, but are you getting website visitors? Have you increased your email list? Do you have more followers on social media? Have you got a bigger audience than what you had before?
Yeah.
Well, actually, they're all numbers that you probably don't measure through a P&L.
So we've talked a lot about budgets there. So how should a marketing budget be made up?
I think it's one for me is there isn't a one size fits all, and it comes back to depending what your business wants to achieve. For me, there's probably two or three, probably about three key things here. You either want top line sales growth, you want to maximize profit, or you might be in a situation where you're going, I've got some stock or product that I need to get rid of. And longer term businesses are going, what I want to do is build a big brand. We've seen that with a lot of brands that spend a lot of money and they lose money year after year after year. But they've got a big following, and then you can start cutting those marketing costs and your money drops straight through to your bottom line. And I think what I'd say it's important is you've got different buckets and you're very clear in terms of how those buckets are spent. You'll have some that will get a quicker return. You'll have some that's more a brand building and is a longer term investment. And then you'll have an element that goes, actually, there's a bit here and I don't know what I'm going to get from it, but I want to try new things. And I think having that sort of element of going, it's sort of throwaway money, that's as important as anything else.
So we've talked about a lot of buckets there where you should put your money into specific buckets, and we'll use that analogy. And, you've got maybe, say, brand build spend versus campaigns versus promotion versus affiliate costs. How does someone decide what goes into what bucket?
I think there's a bit of trial and error, if I'm completely honest. And for me, it's looking at what's been spent, reviewing it, but being very clear at the outset, going, right, I'm spending this money. What do I want to achieve out of this? And having those open and honest conversations. What I find a lot with businesses is there's a misalignment of expectations. You'll have somebody going, right, I'm going to spend £30,000 this month on marketing and advertising costs. It's like, right, great. And then they might outsource that to an agency. At the end of the month, they're reviewing. It's like, well, my sales didn't improve. And they went, well, no, because you spent it in this area, which is going to be a longer term.
Yeah.
So it's aligning that and the expectations, but don't be afraid to, there's two things. Don't be afraid to tweak it if needed, but also don't expect instant results on everything.
Yeah, this is where working with whether it's outsourced experts becomes, key. I've said it multiple times. Marketing strategy is really, really, really important. That's why we do it. We work with the company, understand where they sit as a competitor within the market space, who their audiences are, what they're doing online, and then develop a channel strategy based on that information. So it's information-based strategy. But then a lot of that comes from, in terms of which channel we're going to execute as part of the media plan, is actually what's your budget? Because this is everything you should be doing. But if you only have a small budget, then these are the areas you need to focus on in the short term. That's going to get you a better or more likely better return on investment and ROAS. So when you are splitting things into buckets, we can say, well, you don't have enough money to split into 5 buckets, but you have enough money to split into 2 or 3. And these are 2-3 buckets we think you should focus on. But if you did have all the money, these are the 5 buckets you need to spend it on. And then be agile, be adaptive, get the expertise from outsourced people. So that's really, really, really valuable. Just talking about the value of outsourcing experts, I talk about it from a marketing perspective in terms of that's why we do free strategy, get the insights. We help them then create a media plan in line with their budgets or where we think it should go based on data. What about these smaller companies that don't have, a marketing, so they don't have a marketing director, don't have a finance director, etc. They're probably either a one-man band or a small team. What can they do?
For me, I think now with the fact that you can outsource finance, marketing, sales, pretty much any area of your business, what it's allowing is these SME businesses access to greater expertise than what they've been able to afford before. When it were traditionally, you get somebody and you get them full-time pretty much, and that's what you can get. Now, the way I look at, even from a finance point of view, I won't do tax returns or statutory accounts, because the way I see it is that specialist. And for me, somebody that's doing that every day as part of their job can quickly add much more value. The other bit that I think is probably a bit of a hidden bit is the fact that you're working with several different companies at the same time. You take the knowledge and learnings from one business and can apply it to another. And I think that is a great benefit that people get. So I just think it gives much more access to a higher level of individual.
What's one piece of advice you're going to give to our listeners to take away from this podcast? What's one thing, based on all the points we've discussed, that you would say, this is where you should prioritize?
I think for me, it'd been very clear in terms of what you want out of what you're doing. So if you go, right, I want to spend some money. Well, what are you wanting to achieve by that? What are you hoping to achieve? Be able to measure it as well. Because we sit here, so it's people sometimes just go off and go, right, I'm going to spend this. And you go, right, well, is it a success or not? You go, well, I don't know, because I didn't set any goals at the beginning. But if you're going to start spending money, you start a business.
Yeah.
Why do you start a business? Well, what's your end goal of starting a business? And there's always an end goal. So what's that? And I'd say to people, be clear in terms of what you want out of something when you start.
Yeah, because it helps realign your focus of what needs to be done. So if you ever lose track, you go back to why you set it out, which is why we always say, give us a brief as an agency with anything marketing. What's the budget? What's the KPIs? We will key performance indicators that we need to hit. What are the targets, goals? What does success look like, etc. So when we do set out, they had a clear brief. This was their budget. This is what they wanted to achieve. And that's why they wanted to do it. We then can take that information, apply it to a strategy, implement that strategy based on the budget they have, based on our recommendations, and then start to measure the impact of it through digital marketing methods and say, right, your marketing budget is working because of all these leads coming through, and you're telling us X percentage of them are converting, or because of all these sales coming through at a target cost per conversion of X. But then you start looking at the longer term results of that in terms of, well, how many repeat customers do you get? So what's the average value of a customer, etc. So you can start showcasing and forecasting better results. I think that's been a really, really, really great insight. I don't think many people get that opportunity to get that specific advice. So I want to thank you, Ben.
Thanks
for joining. No, it's great. That's why we do the Bobble podcast, get guests to give you guys watching and listening the insights you need, take away some of the advice that you need. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and don't forget to reach us at Bobble Digital across social media platforms, hashtag Mr. Bobble, hashtag Ask Bobble, or hashtag Bobble Pod. We look forward to catching you on the next episode. Thank you.